You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Well, now, Dick, you mentioned earlier that Brian Canham was coming in. I said,
Indeed.
Don't mention the guest until they turn up, because we did that once before and they didn't turn up for... I think they got lost or they got the wrong day.
They got the wrong day, but I was pretty...
I
knew Brian and thought he'll be here.
I can mention Brian now. Brian Canham has arrived, and his wife, Raquel. Raquel?
Correct.
Not Rachel? Rachel or Raquel? Raquel.
Raquel's in Raquel Welsh.
That's right.
Yes.
That's easy to remember.
How obvious, Dick. I knew you were going to say that. Do you know anyone else that's called Raquel beside Raquel Welsh?
Gee, I don't
No,
know.
that's right.
Apart from...
That
Present
was
company.
usually followed with that when Raquel would introduce
That's,
herself.
of course, people say, oh, after
As in
Raquel Welsh. It's like,
But then as people got sort of under 50, you'd say as in Welsh, they go, oh, you're Welsh, are you?
yeah, that's right. Under 50. I met someone the other day.
So why are you called Brian? Was there an original Brian,
Just the original, mate.
The life of.
That's right.
Is in the life of Brian.
That's right.
I met a woman the other day called Ava. And, of course, I don't know if you remember Ava Gardner.
Gardner.
No one else. I've never heard anyone other than that person. Oh, you're named after Ava Gardner. So I actually was, yes. My parents loved Ava.
I love old movies, so...
But we digress, Brian. So welcome to You Cannot Be Serious. Now, we've just did this on the last segment, but Pseudo Echo. I know you formed the band in 1984.
82.
82.
But 84 is the
I've got that
anniversary.
written down here, and I still didn't read it
Yeah.
properly. 1982 with Pierre Gigliotti.
Pierre Gigliotti. Yeah.
Gigliotti.
Gigliotti.
You were high school buddies.
Yeah.
And I want to know where you got the name Pseudo Echo. It's an interesting name. We've mentioned what pseudo means. We've mentioned what echo means. Where did you come up with
Well,
that?
when we started Pseudo Echo, because prior to Pseudo Echo, we were just your standard garage band with a couple of guitars and drum kits and things like that. When we made the change and we started becoming an electronic band, and
When was that? When did that happen
it
exactly?
was sort of about. Well, the start of it was kind of close to 80, 81, and then by the time we got the configuration of Pseudo Echo, it was 82.
Yep.
And that's when we started investing in a whole bunch of electronic gear, keyboards and electronic drum machines and things like that. Back in those days, the synths were pretty basic. They didn't have, like now you just push a button and you've got this sound and that sound. You had to make the sound.
Yep.
You had to be a computer nerd and read the manual and learn all the controls.
And you did all that?
I've seen an old synthesizer. I'm a whiz at synths.
Yeah.
If I say so myself. And so one of the synthesizers we had, which is an iconic synthesizer called an ARP Odyssey, used by many famous bands, the manual had all these sort of examples of sounds with a diagram of where to put the dials for each sound. As we were talking about band names, our fellow keyboard player, Tony Lugton, was perusing through his manual, and we said, so what are we going to call ourselves? And he was just up to page 59 or whatever it was, and it said Pseudo Echo Machine. And he said, how about Pseudo Echo? He may have even said it wrong, pronounced it wrong, but we sort of heard it. We said, that sounds good. And, being the 80s, it was all about technology and echo machines.
Yep.
So it sounded right.
So it came from the catalogue of an ARP.
That's right. It was a sound.
Synthesizer. There you go.
Well, now that it's explained, Brian, it sounds very logical that you would call it that. So I'm tempted to say, so you deliberately did this style of music, unlike Villy Manilli, who tried to get away with pretending that that person tried to get away with pretending that she was she?
No,
Milli Vanilli were two
singing-
people and that they were lip syncing.
That's right.
Yeah, and they weren't actually even singing on their own records.
No. That was
But you never did anything like that.
Oh,
you
no,
actually really performed.
We
And
were real pioneers.
And you were
of that
part-
sound. Yeah.
in a sense, you were part of the movement
Absolutely.
of that period that I guess could be called, new wave or new romantic.
New romantic,
even.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
bands like Ultravox, Depeche Mode overseas,
Simple
and you were
Minds,
almost the Australian vanguard.
Yeah, like
Could you say that?
absolutely. Like for us, it was tough competition. There was a garage band on every corner.
Yep.
And they were all just standard sort of 70s rock sound.
Yep.
As we were. So when we made that move and I started to hear these new bands overseas, and and I knew that it was keyboards that we needed.
Yep.
It was an electronic sound that they
Yep.
were all having that was making this new wave. And so that's why we invested in all that gear, and we just basically, even the songs we had in our set then, we just converted them to electronic songs.
Yes.
You know, where there would be a guitar riff, we just make that a synthesizer riff.
synth riff, yeah.
Where there was a bass part on guitar, we played on a bass keyboard.
And the Aussies are kind of used to kind of pub rock in the late 70s.
right.
How did they take to a band using mainly synthesizers in 1981?
In the early days, it was a bit courageous because we didn't even have a drummer. We
Yep.
just had a rhythm
drum machine.
Because the drum machine
Was that,
sounded
was that Echo,
fantastic.
the Echo?
That's right. It sounded fantastic. It sounded like, you know, when your drums are produced on an album.
Yeah.
Whereas when you hear a drum kit raw, they're pretty crap sounding. They're rattly and shitty, and it's not a great groove. Unless you've got a great sound guy, the drums will sound pretty average.
Yep.
But with a drum machine, as soon as you plugged it in, it sounded epic.
Yeah, and obviously drum machines have become a huge part of popular music. Obviously rap music
Oh,
is,
yeah.
drum machines is like, and that's a huge part of rap music.
On the downside, having a drum machine, you've got nobody on stage with the energy.
Yep.
It's just completely sterile on stage.
Yep. So how did you do it?
And so we did that for about maybe 6 months. Braved it. You know?
Yep.
Ice blocks chucked at us and
Yep.
things hurled at us all the time. And luckily we had pretty catchy songs. And
Yep.
so eventually through the gig, they go, these guys are all right.
Yeah.
But it was a bit scary, you know, because to see just a couple of guys, one guy with a guitar singing
Yep.
and two keyboards.
Yep.
It was like, what the fuck's that?
Were there many other synthesizer bands around at the time?
There were really none.
Yep, yep. So you almost did.
It was a handful. Real Life were giving it a go, but
Real
most
Life.
of them were more traditional.
Ollie Olsen,
They'd
did you
have
ever
a
hear
drummer.
his stuff? Ollie
Yeah,
Olsen? Yep.
Ollie.
Yep.
So about 6 months in, we got wind of some more technology, which was electronic drums.
Yep, yep.
Like a drum kit.
But you actually had a drummer in the early days.
Yeah, well, this is when we got him.
Yep,
It was
yep.
really, like we did about 6 months of gigging without, and then bang, we bought ourselves an electronic drum kit. Now, we had to call up a music shop in the UK in the middle of the night, because we'd seen the ad in the catalogue. And there's no internet, or you know, it's old school. And, you know, on the phone,
Are they those Sin drums?
yeah, Simmons. They were like hexagonal shape, plastic, and they had a brain which had all the electronic sounds.
And
in
who
it.
was your drummer?
And it was Anthony Aguirre. We
Oh, that's
recruited
right.
him on drums and said, get rid of your old kit. We're putting this thing on. So I can remember the first gig was in Melbourne. We had it under a veil.
Yep.
And the crowd was there to see us as usual, expecting to see the three pieces.
Yep.
And all of a sudden there's this drum kit. And when they took the veil off, the crowd started cheering.
Yep.
Because they'd never seen anything like it. It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell? It looked like a spaceship.
Yep.
So
This is a
that
full
was the
synth band.
start of us having a live drummer.
There it is.
So someone said that you were a fashionable, coiffured young synth pop band when you had a makeover, I think, after you reformed.
Sounds about right.
Yes. I've just been listening to this. You are absolutely the epitome of being innovative because you
Thank you.
left when you left high school
Yep.
with your friend Pierre
Yep.
Gigliotti
Yep.
to start out doing this, and you said there was a band, a garage band on every corner, mate, and to stand out, you've had to do something.
That's right.
You've had to be unique, and
right.
people would underestimate that about Pseudo Echo and you because. To stand out and do what you've done is that is innovation in the extreme. So I hope people appreciate that, Brian. That's
right.
No, I
extraordinary.
agree. And there's been many electronic bands that have followed, in a sense, in your footsteps. So, like, obviously now it's not uncommon for there to be electronic
now
music
it's-
bands.
Now
You know.
it's kind of the norm.
Exactly.
It's
presets and,
that's right.
you know,
So yeah,
many other Australian
it's
bands.
become a very unique decade, the '80s of
Yep.
that sound, and now it's back with a vengeance.
Of course, yeah.
So,
back for a while now.
I just watched the on Netflix. I think it was how Spotify started. It's called the playlist,
Yeah.
and so those couple of blokes got together and thought. So you got together with someone at high school, Pierre,
Yeah.
and. How did you decide that this was the way to go? Were you a music? Did you have a musical bent
Yeah.
before that, or
Well-
did you thought, well, we'll try and do something when we leave high school? Why don't we have a crack at this?
Well, my dad was a muso. He was a jazz musician, played trumpet, trombone, sax, bass, bit of piano. He was just a sort of a hobby player. He played in his Air Force band.
So
back
you
in the day.
grew up in a musical
So there was
household.
a bit of music around, but my brothers were all football players and great football players. They had lots of trophies, and I was terrible at football. I always wanted to be a football star because my brothers were all stars, and my oldest brother played with Collingwood.
Did you
for a
play
little while
in high school then?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I did. But I was so pipsqueak. I was so little. They'd put me as a rover or whatever, or a wing, or chuck me somewhere, and all I'd do is I was okay at getting the ball, but I was just a terrible kick.
Yeah.
And I've honed that, by the way, since I'm pretty good now.
That's where we working on his game.
But so the sport thing wasn't for me, and I was just natural to. I was always drawn to a piano or a guitar, or I'd know every kid in the neighbourhood who had a guitar and an amp, and I'd be pestering them, can I have a turn of it? And every band, like I said, there was a garage band on every corner. So for me, it was bliss, head out with my posse on our dragsters, turn up to the garage and just watch some band, playing, 70s rock covers.
So that I was going to ask you, so you wrote the songs that you
I
sing?
wrote the majority of the songs, because...
none of them are covers?
Well, Funky Town, our swan song. It's
One of your biggest hits.
that was a cover from...
Who did the original Funky Town?
79.
Lip Sync, wasn't it?
Lip Sync,
Yep,
what they were called. They just had that one song, and I heard Molly play that song at a club in about 1980.
Yep.
It was released a year before overseas. Then about 1980 it was released in Australia, and I heard.
And he was a DJ, was he?
He was DJing, and I remember making a mental note of that song. That's a corker.
Yeah.
The bass part of it and the white noise and it was something about it. Very simple, but I loved it, and I just kept that in my back pocket for the next 5 years.
And you had international success with that song.
Killed it with that song.
And you would have to pay royalties to the people. Well, how does that work?
Steve Greenberg, the writer, he'd take in a writer share, but we also take in a share as with the artist and the performer. So it's good all around. Everybody's happy.
And you appeared many times on Countdown?
Many times.
Now, Molly Meldrum was sort of influential in your early career. Like, he was an early supporter of the band, is that correct?
Well, you got to remember, I used to go to his club when he was DJing.
What was his club?
It was the Croc.
The Croc.
In the northern suburbs. And when he first got a tip-off about this new band, that he was told to come and check out this new band, he had no idea I was in it.
Yep.
So when he comes along and he starts, he's looking at us, and he's, the gig was packed that night. We had a great crowd, and Molly's there freaking out. He's going, I know this little kid. He's the kid who sits on the sidelines and listen to my music every Thursday night.
Yep.
And so that was kind of a cute connection.
Yep.
He didn't expect that, and he was really impressed with. Like I said, the gig was a killer gig.
Yep.
Came backstage with a posse and introduced himself, and then. We didn't think much of it. We just thought, well, that's good. That's got to be good. Maybe he'll tell people about us.
Yep.
And the next week, we got a call through our management, and he said, we want to put you on the show.
On Countdown.
And we were just like, well, hang on, we haven't even got a record. Like, what do you mean put us on the show?
So of the songs that you wrote, I was discussing this with someone the other day. I was discussing it with Sue. Most songs, we were actually speaking about Taylor Swift, most songs that people write are about relationships or either breaking up or starting out. How do you go about writing a song, and what did you base your songs on that you wrote?
Yeah, I reckon for me, I went against the grain a bit there. I knew that most songs were kind of lovey-dovey.
Yep.
And I didn't want them to be lovey-dovey.
No.
Even though I have a song called "A Beat for You" in my heart. But
I remember it. I love that song.
That's right. So, but generally, I went for a more kind of gothic approach. I wanted the lyrics to sound quite abstract and intriguing and very vague at the best. I like them to be full of metaphors, and so it took a lot. And there were so many metaphors in my songs, more than I even knew myself. So when I read my lyrics that I wrote when I was just 18, 19, 20, sometimes I read more into them now than I think I ever even intended to put in a message.
At the time, yeah.
And people would often come up to me and say, oh, that song, Stranger in Me, or Destination
Unknown.
Is that about this or is that about that? And I'd sort of think about it and go, it's interesting. I don't know what I was singing about there. Stranger in Me sounds like I'm some sort of schizophrenic or something. Like it's an unusual lyric, but it just dealt with what I was going through. becoming famous.
I hesitate to ask this, Brian, but were any of them? I asked Brett Whiteley when I interviewed. I think I was the last person to interview Brett Whiteley.
Fantastic.
And he had an alchemist. I think he had a series called The Alchemist. And I said, "Did you write any of those on drugs?" He said, "Yep, I was on acid when I painted those pictures." Did you write any? Were you into substances at all?
When I was young, I'd be lucky if I drank a lemonade and vodka.
So none of the songs were just from an outer body experience.
In the later years.
These days it's a different experience because I enjoy a bit of green and a
little bit of marijuana.
I've done whole albums like that. So I wish I had have known about that back then.
So you had multiple top 20 hits in the 80s. So this would have set you on the... and you went toured overseas and had overseas success.
We did, a couple of tours of Europe, Japan.
To the UK?
Several of the US and the UK,
And I just from reading this, I think there's been 15 odd members of the band over the years. Is that right?
Probably about right.
I counted them. I looked it up.
I hadn't even counted
them.
It
said there's 15.
I'll take your word on that. Sounds about right. Maybe more, actually.
Where were the ones that were listed? And it said
right.
you disbanded. Why did you disband?
Well, what happened is in 88... we sort of took a turn with our musical direction.
1990 you disbanded, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much. That's
Says
right.
that.
That's right. That sounds about right. Because 88 we delivered an album called Race. And this album was a real departure for Pseudo Echo. It was...
more rock and roll.
It was rock. It was stadium rock, LA rock.
Why did you do that?
Because that's where the trends were going.
Because there was a move against synthesizer music, wasn't there?
Well,
you got a lot of hard time for it, didn't you?
Well,
for being a synth
there was a
band.
move away from it, but also there was a movement of rock fused with electronic music.
That's it.
And that was where you had bands like Bon Jovi, and then Van Halen all of a sudden come out with Jump, and its predominant instrument is a synthesizer. You got ZZ Top making a comeback and having all this electronic backing, with...
they use drum machines.
Unheard of. And so all of a sudden, Run DMC have got,
Beastie Boys,
and stuff like this, and you just go, it's changing. It's moving away from the pop 80s to a kind of a rock 80s. So being based in Australia, we couldn't really stand our ground and just say, we'll stay with this sound because the trends move. And as the trends move, we had to go, we'll have to jump on this and reinvent. We probably took a step slightly too far, looking back. Because we went from a kind of this real new romantic look to all of a sudden long hair and, ripped jeans and Marshall amps and all this. So it was a bit of a quantum leap. But ironically, over the years, the fans have embraced that again and it's all good. But let me get back to what happened. So 88, we delivered this album. It wasn't well received at the time. Fans were a bit stunned. The press were kind of not impressed. They just thought... They didn't believe it. They said, that's not real. These guys can't rock. But ironically, that's what I grew up with. So it was just a return to my roots, really. So the band did a tour, and it wasn't a great tour. It was a hard tour. We didn't have the numbers that we used to have. And we started to think about calling it a day. We didn't really officially announce anything, but we were sort of saying, I think we've had enough. I think it's time to move on. I wanted to move into production and get behind the scenes rather than being the rock star. And so I was giving it a good thought.
Was there disharmony?
It was starting to be that, because that last album, there was a change in songwriting structure, and I sort of got a bit of a push out from a couple of the newer members. And then we had a big meeting. A weekly organisation called us in for a big meeting. There were lawyers and record company representatives, and it looked very impressive. And we thought, well, this is it. We're about to get dumped off the label, and that'll be that. And they turned around and said, we've decided to stick by you guys, and we'll invest in a couple more albums. And that was the biggest surprise to me. I absolutely thought it was all over. So that was great. But the next bombshell was two of the guys in the meeting, in the band, turned around and said, oh, actually, we don't want to continue. We're heading off to do our own thing. And so that divided the camp. And right in that meeting, we just had to go, well, what are we going to do? Are we continuing, or half you guys want to go this way? My mate Pierre was sort of on the fence, and he said, I don't know if we should go on without these guys. you know, and I said, okay, we'll call it a day. That's that. So that was it, 88, 89, bit of touring, by 90 it was all over.
And when did you reform?
98.
Formed in 97, 98, New Year.
Yep.
So that was a random thing. Some guy was harping at me and wanted me to play in this retro club, an 80s retro club. And so it's only 10 years
so
after.
you've been 8 years off the scene and
Yeah.
someone suddenly said, I
Yeah.
tell you what,
There was already a resurgence
Brian
happening
Canham
in the
to-
80s then.
Yeah.
And he called me and said, you've got to put the band back there. And I said, look, half of us not talking to each other. And it doesn't matter as long as I've got you. And, you know, I said, all right, let me call my mate Pierre, see if he can do it. And I'll grab 2 other guys. He said, no worries. So I had just thought about it. I hadn't really committed to anything. Then he said, okay, calls me up and he goes, got a New Year's Eve gig. The Pointer Sisters are doing it, but they pulled out. And he said, do you guys want to do it? And I said,
Where was this?
this was in Sydney, Club Metro. It was a big 80s club.
The
big,
Pointer
massive.
Sisters.
Pointer Sisters
Yeah.
were going to do it. And 11th hour, they pulled out. And he said, you're on. If you want it, it's your gig. It was a good payer too. Maybe the Pointer Sisters money. it was good. So I said, okay, that's kind of
You're on
convincing.
board.
And
I'm on
what
board.
songs did you do for
And
that?
we just did the 80s catalogue.
The
We
ones
went
that you
back to
had,
the early
yep.
hits and all that, strung together about, a 15, 20 song set, and I rehearsed the band up pretty quickly. I spent a lot of time with all the synthesizer sounds because I wanted it to be very convincing. I didn't want it to sound like a half-assed, trashed together version. So
Milli Vanilli version.
that's right. So it was. I did it with a passion.
Yep.
So I had a goal. Finally, I said,
Yep.
right, this has given me direction to do it. And the night was sensational. It was chockers. Thousands. I'm talking.
Went over well.
Club. It was fantastic, and the phones just started ringing.
And the rest
after
is
that.
history. And
Beautiful, mate.
your career reignited and
we were back
you
on.
started again.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, really good.
So you've backed. I get all this information off. You've backed. You've had scores on movies that you've had soundtracks of. I see your autumnal.
Yep.
Autumnal Park.
Autumnal Park. Autumnal.
Backed.
Who knows how to say it? But
Backed. Friday the
Friday the
13th.
13th. Yeah. So we had lots of sort of movie placement. The big wigs overseas have these great connections, and Wheatley had some good connections, and some of these films just they knew we were this underground band from Australia, and they heard some of our material. They did this perfect. We had this song called His Eyes. It was all dark and moody, and sort of got a sinister theme throughout. And the Friday 13th franchise grabbed it and said we want it in the film.
Beautiful.
And
So
that was great for us. There was a surf film that put one of our songs in. Revenge of the Nerds wanted to put our song in there. So we started getting lots of songs in film, and that really just, solidified our audience around the world, really.
Often wondered how people who make movies select the soundtracks or what they do, so they're familiar with your work because of your overseas overseas touring and that.
That's right. So they obviously just know the stuff they know, and then they put in suggestions. And I think that we probably just fit the mould. We were this kind of, at the time then, we're this sort of new romantic, gothic-looking band, and they must have said, this fits the bill.
Is that a fiscally Is that a fiscally successful thing to be part of? Do they pay
pay well?
good
Yeah,
money?
it's good. It is good money.
Yeah.
They'll look. I think it's changed over the years. I think half the time you've got to pay them to be in it now. But in the day, it was good.
Who was your record company back in the day?
Well, we had EMI in Australia and RCA/BMG for the rest of the world.
Rest of the world.
BMG really. RCA became BMG. And, they were a big record label. And we had a fantastic agent in America, the William Morrissey agent.
Oh.
So they were sort of mainly models and kind of actors. But Wheatley had a great
They're
contact
huge
in
in
there.
LA, yeah.
Wheatley's best man for his marriage was John Marks, was the CEO, and so John was a great fan of the band and travelled on the road with us in the States, and so we got some incredibly good gigs. We were on One Life to Live, with the TV series over there. It's a massive soapy.
Nice.
And they had us, on that. They got us on the Joan Rivers show, the Dick Clark show, they really pulled some strings.
Did you tour with other groups, and did you get on well with them, or some people you didn't get on well with?
Any war stories?
sure there
air
are.
of jealousy and rivalry coming from down under, or what are some of them?
Look, the international ones were all great. You know, we toured with the Culture Club and the Village people in early 2000.
Yep.
How'd you get along with them?
And that was fantastic. It was really funny. Like, they were all cool guys. They all watch our shows. You know, we toured with Human League. They were fantastic. You know, Phil's a top guy.
Yeah, he's a good bloke.
Yeah,
Did you see him
great.
recently? They toured here recently.
Yeah, I missed that show. Cause we were
They were
touring.
great, actually.
Yeah. So, you know, all of these bands that we toured with were all fantastic. You know, Simple Minds more recently we did in New Zealand.
Yep.
With what's
Jim Kurt.
what's the other bands? Collective Soul and Texas. They were on the bill too.
Yep.
They were great. That was a fantastic lineup. Mm-hmm. So normally it's great. There's not really any problems. If anything, the problems we had were more with the local bands. Like,
Yep.
I think one gig we did, I probably shouldn't mention the band name, but
In Excess.
some shit 80s band, no longer around.
Yeah.
But they were supporting us on some big bloody corporate radio station gig,
Yep.
and it was a big hoo-ha, and they had it all kitted out backstage for us, and they dragged these other dickheads out of the 80s to do this show.
Yep.
And we'd already been touring. We were already a touring act. So we were together and it was all going strong. So they did their opening spot and that was all great. And then they came backstage and it was all nice. Hey, mate, how are you? All this. Then we went out and did our headline spot. When we came back after we did the gig, we came backstage. The whole band room was trashed. They tipped over the table, thrown the food everywhere.
They did a Led Zeppelin, did they?
They tipped the chairs over, threw things over, monitors ripped off. It was just insane. And
It was
we
wrecked.
said, what the hell is wrong with these guys? Are they like 15 still? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and so they got black banned and they never got
Yep.
a gig again. But yeah, it was a bit uncool. But yeah, because we nearly it looked
You
like
destroyed
it might
their
have been
career.
us, so
Yeah,
we
it
just
could have
said,
been
"Hey,
you,
dude,
yeah.
wasn't us." So yeah, it was. It doesn't happen often.
No.
Well, and so your wife,
Raquel, yeah.
Raquel, she manages.
She's the manager now?
handles all. So, how long is this going
This
to
has
go
happened
on?
for about the last 5 years. Is that right, darling? Yeah.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't mean how long's Raquel been. How long what's your next step? You're just going to keep doing it? Have you got how many?
Absolutely.
Yep.
You got a gig coming up,
Raquel
haven't you?
has taken the band from one level up several steps to a major level.
Raquel has?
Raquel, single-handedly, I would say. Incredible. I would give her full brownie points for that. She got me out of the doldrums and perked me up and got me into shape, got me into the gym.
Yep.
Got me fixed up.
You're looking well.
Looking shiny.
And you've had
feeling fit.
couple of new albums the last 10 years,
Yeah,
15 years.
new
Tell us about them.
albums. Yeah, we did the After Party album during the COVID crap.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was-
What do you think of all that, mate? Because I know you're a little bit suspicious of some of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Well,
Can we go into
I probably
that?
shouldn't go there.
We shouldn't go into that? All right,
I'll
mate.
get cancelled.
You'll get cancelled. All right. Well, we won't talk about that.
But I just spent my time smoking healthy products in the forest.
Fair
I would
enough.
say,
Fair
and made some trippy albums
Yeah.
during that time. Which
But
was
that
fun.
lockdown was a bit crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
You know?
great. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So you said Raquel had to get you into shape. You'd strayed, had you? You'd got in. What did
I
you have to
reckon
get
I
you into
just-
shape
I
over?
reckon I just let
Into
myself go.
substances or
No,
were
no, I
you
just let myself
alcohol?
go. No.
Yep.
No, it was just
What do you mean you let yourself
let
go,
myself
Brian?
go. I was putting on weight and I
Oh,
was
yeah.
looking a bit shabby and dishevelled, and I wasn't really,
Oh.
investing in my style
Yes.
as I had done in the
Yep.
past. So Raquel gave me a good makeover.
Fantastic.
And she was great at pointing me at some big influences, and she said, pointed out how Prince had done things over the years,
Yep.
and I started looking at Prince's stuff. I said, yeah, right. I never really got into his material that much, but I can see he's an absolute pro and like
Genius. Musical
top of the
genius.
game. And then she even said, right, we're going to go for a trip overseas, and I'm going to take you to Paisley Park, which was Prince's studio in his house.
Yep.
I told my mates I'm going to Prince's joint.
Yep.
And went and had a look there and met his stage, his guitar tech. His
Yep.
guitar tech was fantastic, gave me all his secrets and
Yep.
told me all this stuff. And then they took us into his editing studio and showed us how he would, finish a show, and then he'd spend 2 hours critiquing the show and bettering it. And I think I really took a feather from my work ethic.
Yep,
And
yep.
it really...
He was a workaholic, wasn't he?
He was a workaholic,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. It was sad when he died too, because
Terrible loss.
And he was someone who was interested in sort of interesting things. He critiqued chemtrails at one stage. Remember that
Yeah,
video
absolutely.
being online?
Yeah.
And he was a very colourful character.
Yeah, absolutely. So these things that Raquel sort of brought to my attention and took me to see bands that I wouldn't have normally gone to see, those things helped me immensely because I think I was just caught up in my own world. I never looked back at myself. So from that time, I started watching back our videos. I started looking at it and going, okay, that looks crap. That's no good. Why am I scratching my ass here? I should be talking to the audience. I should be turning my back. Or, this guy should be standing there and he should be over this side. And there's all these things that you start to build the show back into a proper entertainment. And that took us from doing grotty little pubs to hardly anybody to all of a sudden, doing sellout shows in theatres.
I presume you're a freedom rider and not an activist about... I presume you don't like to be told what you should do with your body, or
That's right.
And the last 3 or 4 years have been horrendous for
right.
everyone who have put up with it.
Right.
Most of us put up with it.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling you didn't put up with it,
No, I didn't.
Brian. A bit like Novak Djokovic and a
that's
few others who thought, no, this is nonsense. And
I'm a free thinker, Sam. And,
yes, you're a political person.
Well, you know what? Politics was the least thing that interested me all my life until the last 3 years. And I bought lots of books on psychology and read lots about human conditioning and did my own thinking.
As a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the things that I was hearing didn't make sense.
And you're being vindicated by the day as things go, as life goes on.
I've got to point out, I'm very alternative. I haven't had a TV set for 20 years. I don't tune into modern media. I have my own thoughts, my own decisions, and I make my own choices. So for me, I don't get any of the slight manipulation and where an agenda can push people around.
Not intimidated to do
no,
things?
because people are conditioned, and they probably don't know they're conditioned, but they are. And it's just something we hear in the airwaves and things like that. So for me, I didn't get that. So when something's announced, I just see it from the outside and I go, hang on, that sounds a bit odd.
Yeah.
So, look, we all have our opinions, and I respect everybody's opinion. I never want anybody to make an opinion based on what I reckon. I go, you know what, make your own opinion, make your own choice. But it's good if you can make your own choice.
Particularly in this country, and particularly this state, it was very hard to exist by people who told lies, who had no idea what they were talking about. But unless you are a rebel and want to be unless you want to be an anarchist and just snub your nose at the law, it was very hard to exist in this state, which forever will be the downfall of the previous government, who were disgraceful. I'm not asking you to back that up, but that's their no. But it was we became world famous for being absolute prudes for no reason.
Yeah.
World's longest lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that obviously stymied your career. Like everyone's, I suppose.
Couldn't tour or work for a couple of years. It didn't matter what status my health was at. It just wasn't an option because there were so many restrictions on performing, and we need a certain amount of people at a show to justify it to cover the cost of the touring. If they're going to say you can only have this many people, we'll say, well, that doesn't work. I'd lose money. So,
so who inspires you, or who impressed you, or who would you go and see either in the past, not necessarily living or not living? Who inspired you? What impressed you, and what did you like? Were you an Elvis fan, or you remember Elvis?
Elvis is probably a bit before my day. But,
was he?
But I love him. I think he's a star. It's hard. When I look at artists, I don't always look at just their music and how I like it personally. I look at what they're achieving. I look at their uniqueness and their craft. And it doesn't matter if I don't like their songs. That's just my personal taste, and everyone has their own thing. Like I said, I wasn't that mad about Prince's stuff. I appreciated it. I liked it later on. George Michael maybe was another one.
George Michael.
But Elvis for sure. I mean, I watched all these docos and I started watching him and thinking, my God, he was a machine, this guy. And there's something to be said for that, being unique, not just being a copier, standing out, taking a risk when everyone else is looking this way or sounding that way. To step out of the crowd, it takes a bit of courage and a bit of a risk taker, and you've got to give it your all.
You got to admire that.
It must be like I couldn't name one song that she sings, and I didn't go and see it. But the phenomena of Taylor Swift is extraordinary. How
Did you see Taylor Swift?
I did not see Taylor Swift.
No, and you wouldn't. I don't necessarily.
It's
be a
hard
fan.
not to see her, but
We
didn't
know
see
of
her.
her.
No,
What do you think? What do you think? I've heard of it too. What do you think of the phenomenon?
Look, I think that's just a big corporate machine. It's that's what all those A-list artists are.
Yeah.
It's a machine. There's a button to be pressed, and when it's pressed, everything operates, and that's how it goes. You've got a corporation that'll have a finger in every pie. I'm not trying to take anything away from these artists because they have to be very talented to be in that position. But these corporations, they have a lot of power and a lot of influence from the amount of streaming, the amount of exposure, everything to do with an artist.
What artists the last 20 years have?
Of your peers in, say, Australia, who do you not gravitate to? Who do you admire?
I really admired Kevin Parker from Tame Impala. Not the car, the band.
Did you ever come across Michael Hutchins in
I
Excess?
met Michael a couple of times.
You get along with him? Or
Well,
was he a bit rude?
what Michael said to me was one year I took out Australia's most popular male performer. That was about 1986 or 7, one of those.
So he would have been in the running as well.
Michael used to take that out every year. I think he took it out 5 years in a row. It was Barnesy be in there, Farney would be in there, and they'd all be in there, the big league.
Yep.
And one year I was nominated.
Yep.
And I was impressed that I was nominated. I didn't expect I'd be in the running, but I thought, that sounds pretty good. And
1 year you won.
and I took it out that year. I was stoked. I just went, wow. So anyway, at the after party, a couple of journalists, saw Michael standing there and me standing here, and they said, hey, I've got to get a photo of you two, the winner and the... I don't know if he said the loser.
And the runner-up.
But he said, he just said the winner and I can't remember. I just tuned out after that. I thought, oh, Jesus. And, his Hutch looking as cool as cool. Yeah. And Michael sort of, I knew the other guys in the band. I just didn't know Michael.
Yeah.
So Michael came over and shook my hand and they took some photos. And,
that was nice.
And he leaned over to me and he said, that award? I said, yeah. He goes, it's yours, take it. Because I think it was a stigma to him.
Yeah.
I think he just...
He was happy not to win it.
I think he was happy not
So
to
you
win
were
it.
nominated for a lot of awards and you won a number of them?
Yeah.
So to be recognised by, I don't know, your peers, I suppose, is the most important thing. We've had a discussion about the media, about football earlier on, about just on what basis do people become hypocrites and try and placate their bosses and become sycophants. But if you're recognised by your peers, that is good. So
That's good, yeah.
It's been a fantastic career for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the biggest things that means to you. I mean, to have respect from your peers is definitely a good goal.
And do you have more song? Did you working on writing any more material?
I've got a.
How do you do that? You sit down and
I have
tinkle
my
around?
studio in the middle of the house in the forest there, so it's a good inspiration. We're mid-tour. We're doing a machine tour, which we took from the original name, Pseudo Machine.
Yep.
So that's an interesting tour because previously we did a big concert run in theatres. This one we've brought it back to the clubs so they can all dance. And
you've got a concert in Melbourne next week,
We've
is
got
that?
Billboard, 170 Russell.
What day is that?
That's the May 24.
May 24.
Get along. That's going to
Billboard,
be epic because it's a good old Billboard.
Yeah, wow.
170
Everyone
Russell,
knows
they call it
Billboard.
these days. So it's a great gig. It's all cascaded. It's
And
got
are you
floors.
doing that just you?
No, it's Pseudo Echo.
Yeah, no, I mean, just no one else.
There will be an
lead
opening
up.
act, but I don't know
Yep.
who it is.
You've got a supporting act.
There is a support act.
Yeah.
So there's that happening. There's I'm making a new remix album where I've already done one with the listening track, our first single.
Yep.
So that was like an anniversary.
Is that the 40th anniversary?
Yeah,
so?
it is.
Or it is, yeah.
it is.
Yeah. 'Cause
That's
that,
right.
I love that track, by the way.
Thank
That
you.
first track was just fantastic.
Yeah, so we did that remix, and that's been really well received with the fans. Which is it's a fine line with remixing. I'm not a big fan of letting anyone touch my stuff because I feel I took my name on it, my voice on it, my brand, but it's sometimes not anything to do with what I am. It's somebody else's work just with my voice. So I feel a little bit disconnected sometimes from remixes. So I chose to do these myself, which is challenging because it's kind of a young person's game. So you've got to really educate yourself and open your ears up and have a listen. But then again, I also don't like following. I don't like jumping on the trend that everyone else is doing. Sometimes I'm so out of fashion that it's in fashion.
So you get up in the foothills, construct a big banger, light it up, chill back and just see what comes up and put it down on paper and go to Billboard and play it.
That's right. You've got to be cautious about the operating of software.
Machine. That's right.
When you push the
Don't operate any heavy machinery.
Push the erase button in the wrong spot.
That's right, like we do here sometimes.
Yeah. You've got to have your shit together.
So you got a new Pseudo album on the way, you think?
Well, the remix album, and then probably next year. Well, next year we're going to do the celebration of the Love and Adventure album.
Oh, great.
So that's the 40th anniversary.
Well, that's a great album.
We got a few things already in the pipeline for the next couple
I remember
of years.
buying that at Doncaster Shopping Town in 1984. How's that when I would have been 14?
And you'll like this, Richard. I don't know if you know already, but I did a little bit of acting.
Yes, you did.
A little tiny bit.
He had a part in my film, The Beautiful and Damned.
I did it, and Richard got me started. But then, of lately, the guys from Regurgitator, Quan in particular, asked me to be in their video clip of their latest song, Cocaine Runaway.
Oh,
they said you need to be a cocaine addict and you're driving a Lamborghini. And I said, I'm pretty sure I know a few of those, so I'll just go and have a little look and take some notes, and away we went. And he did say to me, look, how do you feel about wearing a wig?
Yeah.
I said, what are you trying to say? So I said, let's have a look at the wig. And it was like a Don Johnson wig. So I said, I'm all right with that.
You'll
so
go
we've
with
got
it.
some pastel gear, pastel
Bit
suit.
of a Miami Vice.
Yeah, well, I had the whole thing going on.
Well, Brian, if you're after props, I can't supply you with the cocaine, but if you step through that door, I can give you a Lamborghini.
Yeah, that's great.
I was just going to say, so who's marketing the Billboard gig? How do people, or is it sold out? Or?
It's in house. Raquel and her posse. They get out there and
How do you get tickets?
Well, tickets are online. You can go to pseudoecho.net. It's just one word.
Pseudoecho.net.
Pseudoecho.net. We've got, all the links are there, or you can just go straight to one.
Ticketek.
Ticketek, Oztix, all of those things.
Well, we had Mike Brady in a couple of weeks ago, and we mentioned his gig. He texted me this morning, and he said he did it yesterday. Thursday. He said it was sold out, and he said he thanked us. He thought we might have
contributed.
We might have contributed. So
idea,
we
Mike.
hope you can. We wouldn't have to contribute to yours. I'm sure it will be a success enough. But we really appreciate you coming in, Brian Canham, and Raquel. Raquel. Thank you very much for coming in. And always a good idea if you're going to introduce people is get their names spelt and pronounced correctly. Sorry about that, Raquel. So it's been fantastic for you to come in. I really appreciate it, and we wish you well. And we might sneak into Billboard.
Come on down.
A couple of names on the door. What do you reckon there, Raquel?
We don't want any
VIP
names on the door. We're not into that. We'll buy a ticket if we go. That's
Fair
what we'll
enough.
do. We don't want any names on the door. That's his business. So we don't want to encroach on his business.
all
We'll
right.
pay. So thank you very much for coming in, Raquel, and Brian Canham from Pseudo Echo. Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Great stuff.